My coworker vanished at 5 p.m. every day without a word. Then I discovered she'd been working a second job from her desk. There's a certain rhythm to office life. The morning coffee run, the midday slump, the afternoon countdown to freedom. I'd been at Sterling Marketing for 4 years, and I'd learned to read the room like a second language. I knew when to approach my boss, when to avoid the break room, and when to pretend I didn't hear the whispered arguments from the corner office. But there was one thing I never understood about my coworker, Jessica. Every day at exactly 5 p.m., she'd disappear. No goodbye, no wave, no casual, see you tomorrow. She'd be at her desk 1 minute, and the next she'd be gone. Her chair would be pushed in, her monitor dark, her mug rinsed and placed upside down on the drying rack. It was like she'd never been there at all. I thought she was just rude. I thought she was one of those people who treats work like a transaction and people like furniture. I was wrong about everything. I work in the client services department at Sterling Marketing, a mid-sized firm that handles advertising campaigns for regional retail chains. It's not a glamorous job, but it's stable. My days are filled with spreadsheets, client emails, and the occasional crisis when a campaign goes sideways. I've been here long enough to know everyone's quirks, their coffee orders, their pet peeves, and their secret snack stashes. Jessica started about 6 months after I did. She was quiet, efficient, and kept to herself. She didn't join us for happy hours or potlucks. She didn't participate in the birthday card signings or the Secret Santa exchange. She was polite but distant, the kind of coworker who says good morning, but never asks how your weekend was. At first, I assumed she was just shy. Over time, I assumed she just didn't like us. And honestly, that was fine. Not everyone needs to be best friends with their coworkers. But her 5 p.m. disappearances bothered me more than I wanted to admit. It started as a small annoyance. We'd be in the middle of a conversation, and I'd turn around to ask her a question, and she'd be gone. Her jacket would be off her chair, her bag would be missing, and her computer would be locked. She never said goodbye. She never even made eye contact in the last 5 minutes of the day. It was like she was being beamed up by aliens at the stroke of 5. I mentioned it to my coworker, Marcus, one afternoon. "Does Jessica ever say goodbye to you?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of the office's burnt coffee. Marcus shrugged. "Nope, she just vanishes. I've been here for 7 years, and I think I've heard her say goodbye maybe twice. Both times were to the cleaning staff." "That's so weird," I said. "Doesn't it bother you?" "Not really. She does her work, she does it well, and she goes home. I'd rather have that than someone who hangs around and gossips all day." He had a point. But still, something felt off. The first time I really noticed something unusual was on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd been working on a client proposal that was due at the end of the week, and I was determined to get a draft done before I left. I was in the zone, the kind of flow state where you forget about time and space and everything except the words on your screen. When I finally looked up, the office was empty. I checked the time. 6:45 p.m. I'd been working for almost 2 hours past my usual quitting time. I started packing up my things when I noticed Jessica's desk. Her monitor was dark, her chair was pushed in, and her mug was upside down on the drying rack. But her coat was still on the back of her chair. Her bag was still on the floor next to her desk. She'd left without her coat. In November, I stared at her empty desk for a long moment. Then I shrugged it off. Maybe she'd forgotten her coat. Maybe she had a second one she kept in her car. It wasn't my business. But the next morning, I noticed her coat was still there, and her bag. And her desk looked exactly the same as it had when I left. I asked around, "Did Jessica leave early yesterday?" "Her stuff is still here." My coworker, Linda, looked up from her computer. "She always leaves her stuff. She says she doesn't like carrying things back and forth. She has duplicates of everything at home." "Duplicates of her coat? Her bag?" Linda shrugged. "She's a minimalist or something." I don't know. I didn't press further, but I started paying attention. For the next few weeks, I watched Jessica more closely. I noticed things I hadn't noticed before. She always arrived at exactly 8:45 a.m. She always took her lunch at 12:30 p.m. She always left at exactly 5 p.m. She was like a clockwork machine, perfectly predictable. But then I noticed something else. Her mouse cursor would move when she wasn't touching it. Small movements, just enough to keep her status active on our team messaging platform. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but then I saw it happen repeatedly. The cursor would drift across the screen, click on something, and then stop. And Jessica would be at the printer or the coffee machine or in the bathroom. She was using a mouse jiggler, a device that simulates mouse movement to keep her status active. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Lots of people use mouse jigglers to avoid being marked as away when they step away from their desk. It's not illegal. It's not even against company policy, strictly speaking, but it was the combination of things that bothered me. The 5 p.m. disappearances, the mouse jiggler, the way she never seemed to take work home, never seemed stressed, never seemed overwhelmed. I mentioned it to Marcus again. "Have you noticed Jessica's mouse moving on its own?" Marcus looked at me like I had 3 heads. "Why are you obsessing over Jessica? She's a quiet coworker who does her job. Leave her alone." "I'm not obsessing," I said defensively. "I'm just curious." "You're nosy," Marcus said, "and you're going to get yourself into trouble." He wasn't wrong. I was nosy, but I couldn't help it. The first real clue came on a Friday. I was working late again, this time because I'd volunteered to help another department with a project that was behind schedule. It was already 7 p.m. and I was the only one on the floor. The cleaning staff had come and gone, and the building was eerily quiet. I went to the break room to make a cup of tea and noticed a laptop bag in one of the storage cubbies. It was tucked away behind some boxes, almost hidden. I recognized the bag immediately. It was the same brand as Jessica's, the same color, the same style, but Jessica's bag was at her desk. I'd seen it that morning. I pulled the bag out and opened it. Inside was a laptop. It wasn't the company-issued laptop we all used. It was a personal laptop with stickers on the back from some software company I'd never heard of. I opened it and pressed the power button. It booted up immediately, no password required. The screen lit up and I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was an open email client, and it was logged into an account for a completely different company. A competitor, actually. One of Sterling's biggest rivals. There were hundreds of emails, all correspondence about accounts, projects, and proposals, all from Sterling's clients. Jessica was working for our competitor, at the same time, from her desk, while being paid by us. I closed the laptop and put it back. I walked to my desk slowly, trying to process what I'd just seen. This wasn't just a side hustle. This was corporate espionage. She was stealing our clients, or at least trying to. She was getting paid by 2 companies to do the same job, and one of them was our direct competition. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Jessica. The way she kept to herself, the way she never seemed to care about office gossip, the way she left at exactly 5 p.m., like she had somewhere else to be. She did have somewhere else to be, not physically, but professionally. She was moonlighting for a competitor, right under our noses. The next Monday, I went to work determined to pretend I hadn't seen anything. I told myself it wasn't my problem. I told myself it was a matter for HR or management. I told myself to just do my job and stay out of it. But then Jessica walked past my desk at 5 p.m., said goodnight in a tone that made it sound like a dismissive afterthought, and walked out the door. I watched her leave. Then I walked over to her desk and sat down in her chair. I opened her top drawer and found a notebook. It was full of handwritten notes, page after page of client names, account numbers, budget figures, and project timelines. All of them were from Sterling's biggest accounts. And next to each entry, she'd written a dollar amount, what our competitor was offering to pay for the client. She wasn't just working for a competitor. She was poaching our clients. She was selling our proprietary information to the highest bidder, and she'd been doing it for months. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the drawer. I returned to my desk and pretended to be working, but my mind was racing. What was I supposed to do? Go to HR, go to my boss, go to the CEO? And what if nobody believed me? What if Jessica found out I'd been snooping? I looked at my phone. It was 5:47 p.m. Jessica had been gone for almost an hour. I walked to the storage cubby and checked the bag again. It was still there. The laptop was still inside. I opened it one more time and clicked on the email client. There was a draft email. It was partially written, addressed to a person at the competitor company. It read, "I've secured the transfer of the Johnson account. The client is ready to move. I need the final payment confirmation by Friday." Johnson was one of our biggest clients. If Jessica stole them, it would cost us millions. I closed the laptop, sat back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. I had a choice. I could walk away and pretend I never saw anything, or I could do something about it. And either way, my life at Sterling was about to change forever. I spent the next 3 days in a haze. My work suffered. My focus was gone. Every time I glanced at Jessica's desk, my stomach churned. She'd smile at me in the hallway, ask me how my weekend was, and I'd force myself to smile back like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't seen the evidence of her betrayal sitting in a storage cubby 20 feet away. It was exhausting, pretending everything was normal. But I wasn't ready to act. I needed more proof. I needed to be absolutely certain before I made any moves. That Thursday, I took a risk. I waited until 5:15 p.m. and pretended to be packing up to leave. Jessica was already gone, her coat and bag still at her desk, her monitor dark. I walked toward the elevators, then slipped into the supply closet instead. I waited for 5 minutes, counting the seconds in my head before I crept back out and made my way to the storage cubby. The laptop was there. I opened it and started scrolling through her emails. The messages went back 6 months. Hundreds of emails, all to the same domain. All from the competitor company. She was in deep. She'd been communicating with at least 4 different people at that company, sending them weekly updates on Sterling's client accounts, contract negotiations, and internal strategies. Then I found the folder. It was labeled Transfers. I clicked on it and found a spreadsheet with 37 rows, 37 clients. Each row had the client name, the contract value, the transfer date, and a checkbox indicating whether the transfer was complete or pending. 10 clients had check marks. 10 clients were already gone. We'd lost 10 clients to our competitor, and nobody at Sterling had even noticed. My hands were shaking. I closed the laptop and shoved it back into the cubby. I needed to tell someone. Now. But who? My boss, the HR director? The CEO? I didn't know who I could trust. If I went to the wrong person, Jessica would find out, and she'd destroy the evidence before anyone could prove anything. I went home that night and sat on my couch for hours, staring at the wall. My cat, Mochi, curled up in my lap and purred like everything was normal. I wish I could have been as oblivious as she was. My mind was spinning with possibilities and consequences. If I reported Jessica, she'd probably be fired. But if she was fired, she might try to destroy the evidence before she left. She might delete the emails, wipe the laptop, and make it look like I was the one who'd been stealing clients. I needed to act strategically. I needed to document everything before she knew I was onto her. The next morning, I arrived at work an hour early. I went straight to the storage cubby and grabbed the laptop. I took photos of every email, every spreadsheet, every piece of evidence. I saved copies of the documents to a USB drive and tucked it into my bra, where nobody would find it. Then I put the laptop back and went to my desk, my heart pounding in my chest. I spent the rest of the day pretending to work. I answered emails, attended meetings, and nodded along to conversations I wasn't really listening to. All the while, I was planning my next move. I'd go to HR at the end of the day. I'd present them with the evidence. I'd tell them everything. But at 4:30 p.m., my plan fell apart. Jessica walked up to my desk and sat down in the chair across from me. She was smiling, but it wasn't the polite, distant smile I was used to. It was something else entirely. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Hey," she said casually. "I need to talk to you about something." "Sure," I said, my voice a little too high. "What's up?" She leaned closer. "I found your USB drive, the one you dropped in the storage closet this morning. I put it in my bag. I thought you might want it back." My blood went cold. I'd been so careful. I'd checked the closet 3 times to make sure I hadn't left anything behind, but I hadn't checked the floor. I hadn't noticed I'd dropped the USB drive. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "I didn't drop anything." Jessica's smile widened. "Oh, I think you did." I looked at the files on it. Very interesting stuff. Emails, spreadsheets, client accounts. "You've been doing some serious detective work." I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. "Here's the thing," she said softly. "I know you know what I've been doing, and I know you've been documenting it, but I also know that if you go to HR, I can make your life a living nightmare. I've been here long enough to know where the bodies are buried. I know about the fake expense reports you filed last year. I know about the client complaint you buried instead of escalating. I know about the email you deleted that would have gotten you fired." I stared at her. "That was a mistake. It was a one-time thing. The client complaint wasn't valid." "Doesn't matter," Jessica said. "What matters is that I know. And if you go to HR with your little USB drive, I'll go to HR with mine, and we'll both end up unemployed. Except you'll be the one with a black mark on your record. I'll just find another job. I already have offers." I felt like I couldn't breathe. She was right. She had leverage. I hadn't just been documenting her crimes. I'd been uncovering a web of corruption that would take down everyone involved, including me if I wasn't careful. "What do you want?" I asked. Jessica leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "I want you to give me that USB drive. All of it. Every single file. And I want you to forget you ever saw anything." "Or what?" "Or I'll destroy you," she said simply. "I'll send that evidence to HR myself, but I'll frame it like you were the one stealing clients. I'll make it look like you were trying to cover it up by pinning it on me. I've got IT connections. I can make it look like you sent those emails from your own computer." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. She was good. She'd thought of everything. She'd been planning this for months. "I don't have the USB drive," I said. "I told you I didn't drop anything." "I don't believe you," she said, "but I'll give you until the end of the day to prove it. Show me the USB drive is empty, and I'll leave you alone. Don't show me, and I'll make your life a misery." She stood up and walked back to her desk. I watched her go, my heart pounding. She'd just threatened me. She'd threatened to destroy my career, and she'd done it with a smile. I had until 5 p.m. to figure out a way out of this. I had evidence against her, but she had evidence against me. It was a standoff, and I had no idea how to win. I sat at my desk for the next 30 minutes, trying to formulate a plan. My mind was racing, but every idea I came up with seemed to end in disaster. I could go to HR and confess my own mistakes. I could go to my boss and explain the situation. I could confront Jessica directly, but none of those options guaranteed that I'd come out of this unscathed. Jessica had leverage, and she wasn't afraid to use it. The clock on my computer read 5:05 p.m. I looked up and saw Jessica's desk. Her chair was empty, her monitor was dark, her coat was gone, and so was her bag. She'd made good on her promise to leave at exactly 5 p.m. no matter what. I walked over to her desk and looked at it. There was a note on her keyboard. It was handwritten, and it said, "I'll be back for the USB drive tomorrow. Don't be late." I crumpled the note and shoved it into my pocket. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. I needed help, but I couldn't trust anyone. Not after what I'd discovered. I walked to the storage closet and checked the cubby where I'd hidden Jessica's laptop. It was still there. I opened it and saw that the files were still intact. But I also saw something else. A new email sent just an hour ago from Jessica's personal account to her competitor contact. It said, "The transfer of the remaining accounts is complete. I've secured the final client. They'll be moving over by the end of the week." She'd stolen every single client. Every last one. If this transfer went through, Sterling would lose millions of dollars, and Jessica would be gone, working for the competitor, collecting a massive commission for bringing over the clients. I closed the laptop and made a decision. I was going to do something reckless, something that might get me fired, but I was going to do it anyway. I went back to my desk and started typing. Not an email to HR, not a message to my boss. I was typing a message to the entire department, every single person in our office. I attached all of the evidence I'd gathered. The emails, the spreadsheets, the documents. I wrote a detailed explanation of what Jessica had been doing, how long it had been going on, and which clients were at risk. Then I attached a second document, a confession. I explained my own mistakes, the expense reports, the buried complaint, the deleted email. I admitted everything. If I was going down, I was going down with all of my cards on the table. I hit send. The email went out at 5:47 p.m. I watched it appear in my sent folder. Then I closed my computer, grabbed my bag, and walked out of the office. I wasn't sure what was going to happen tomorrow. I wasn't sure if I still had a job, but I knew I'd done the right thing. I spent the next few hours pacing around my apartment, waiting for the fallout. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages from coworkers, messages from managers. I ignored all of them. I knew there would be consequences. I just didn't know what they'd be. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of emails, dozens of them, from HR, from my boss, from the CEO. They were all variations of the same message: come to the office immediately. I arrived at 8:30 a.m., earlier than I'd ever arrived in my entire career. The office was buzzing with activity. People were gathered in clusters, whispering to each other. When they saw me, they fell silent. My boss called me into her office. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She stared at me for a long moment. "You sent an email last night to the entire department." It was chaotic, it was messy, but it was also the most courageous thing I've ever seen an employee do. I blinked. "I thought you were going to fire me." "I should fire you," she said. "You admitted to filing false expense reports and burying a complaint. That's a fireable offense. But you also exposed a massive case of corporate espionage that would have destroyed our company. So I'm going to offer you a choice." "A choice?" "You can resign quietly. I'll give you a glowing reference, and you can walk away from this without any marks on your record. Or you can stay. You'll be demoted, obviously, and you'll be on probation for 6 months. But you'll still have a job." I thought about it for a long moment. "What about Jessica?" My boss's face hardened. "Jessica was arrested this morning. Corporate espionage is a federal crime. She's facing serious charges. The competitor she was working for has been notified. They're facing criminal investigation." "Arrested?" I repeated, shocked. "She's been in custody since 6 a.m. my boss said. "We had enough evidence to press charges." "Your evidence?" "You gave us everything we needed to shut down an operation that had been going on for years." I sat back in my chair, letting the information sink in. I'd done the right thing. I'd taken a massive risk, and I'd done the right thing. "I'll stay," I said quietly. "I'll take the demotion. I'll do the probation. But I want to help fix this. I want to help win back the clients she stole." My boss nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and phone calls. We reached out to every client Jessica had tried to poach. Some of them had already left. Some of them were on the fence, but many of them were willing to hear us out. They'd been misled by Jessica's promises, and they were angry. Within 2 months, we'd gotten back 23 of the 37 clients. It was a miracle. We'd lost 10 of them permanently, but we'd salvaged the majority of our client base. And we'd done it by being honest, by admitting our mistakes and vowing to do better. I finished my probation without incident. It was humbling, being demoted. I had to start over from the bottom, but I was grateful for the second chance. A few months later, I got a new coworker. She was young, bright, and eager to learn. I decided to make a point of being the kind of coworker I wished I'd had. I brought her coffee on her first day. I introduced her to everyone. I taught her the ropes. "Thank you," she said one afternoon. "You've been so helpful." "Why are you so nice to me?" I smiled. "Because you're part of this team, and teams look out for each other." She nodded, not fully understanding, but she would. She would learn that the office could be a battlefield, but it could also be a community, if we let it. As for Jessica, I never saw her again. She was convicted and sentenced to prison time. Last I heard, she was serving her sentence with no hope of early release. I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd made her choices, and she'd paid the price. I also didn't feel proud of myself. I'd made mistakes too. I'd covered things up. I'd buried problems instead of facing them. I'd been scared and I'd been selfish. But I'd also learned something valuable. Honesty isn't just about telling the truth when it's easy. It's about telling the truth when it's hard, when it costs you something, when it puts your career on the line. And I'd learned that the people we work with can be our greatest allies or our worst enemies. It all depends on what we choose to reveal about ourselves. I walked out of the office that day at exactly 5 p.m. I said goodbye to my coworkers. I said goodbye to the cleaning staff. I said goodbye to everyone I passed on my way out, because that's what a good coworker does. They show up, they do the work, and they say goodbye. Jessica had taught me that in the strangest way possible, and I vowed never to forget it.